The great hall was silent, except for the soft hum of translation machines. Ambassador Veltar stood at the center of the massive room, his blue skin shining under the bright lights. Around him, creatures from 47 different worlds sat. In their seats, all watching him with their many different types of eyes. The Galactic Council had been meeting for 3 days. They had one topic to discuss: the humans. Veltar looked up at the high seats where the most important council members sat. High Counselor Mordak was there, his 4 arms folded across his chest. His people, the Kreks, had ruled the galaxy for over 1,000 years. When Mordak spoke, everyone listened. The human problem grows worse each day, Veltar said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. 3 years ago, we found them. They had just left their home star system for the first time. We thought they would be easy to control, like all young species. A few council members made sounds of agreement. The Vorthic representative clicked his claws together. The snake-like Seth hissed softly. But they are not like other young species. Veltar continued. They spread to new worlds faster than we expected. They make friends with everyone they meet. Pirates attack their ships, and somehow the humans turn those same pirates into trading partners. We try to limit their expansion, and they find ways around our rules. Council member Zareth, whose people looked like giant insects, stood up. They are just one small species. 43 worlds, you said? We control thousands of worlds. Why do we waste time talking about them? Because they are dangerous, Veltar replied. Not because they are strong. They are dangerous because they make others strong. Every species they meet becomes their friend. Every world they visit becomes their ally. They have turned half the minor species in their sector into a network of support. High Counselor Mordak leaned forward in his seat. When he spoke, his voice was deep and slow. What do you suggest we do? We give them a choice, Veltar said. The same choice we give all species who do not understand their place in the galaxy. They can submit to our guidance, or they can learn why 47 civilizations chose to join us instead of fighting us. The hall buzzed with conversation. Some council members seemed excited. Others looked worried. The humans had never shown any sign of wanting to fight anyone. They seemed to prefer talking and trading to violence. Bring in their representative. Mordak commanded. The great doors at the far end of the hall opened. Ambassador Sarachon walked in, her footsteps echoing in the silent room. She was not very tall compared to most council members, and she had no claws, no extra arms, no thick skin, or natural armor. She looked fragile, but Veltar had studied humans for 3 years. He knew that looks could lie. Sarachon walked to the center of the hall and stopped. She did not bow. She did not show any sign of fear. She simply waited. Ambassador Chun, Mordak said, the council has reached a decision about your species. I'm listening, Sarah replied. Veltar stepped forward. The human expansion must stop. You will not colonize any new worlds beyond your current 43 systems. You will accept council supervisors to oversee all of your technology development. You will allow our guidance counselors to help your people learn proper galactic behavior. Sarah listened without moving. Her face showed nothing. You have 30 standard days to agree to these terms, Veltar continued. Your government must formally accept council authority over human affairs. This is not a request. This is a requirement. And if we refuse? Sarah asked. The question hung in the air like smoke. Several council members shifted in their seats. Most species never asked that question. They usually agreed right away, or at least tried to negotiate. High Counselor Mordak stood up slowly. All 4 of his arms spread wide, a gesture that meant finality among his people. Then the council will demonstrate why 47 civilizations chose cooperation over conflict. We have fleets that could darken the skies of 1,000 worlds. We have weapons that could crack planets. We have armies that have never known defeat. Sarah Chun nodded once. I understand. Do you? Mordek asked. Do you truly understand what you would be facing? The combined might of 47 advanced civilizations? Technology that your species cannot even imagine? Military forces that have kept peace in this galaxy for over 1,000 years? I understand that you're threatening my people, Sarah said quietly. I understand that you want us to stop being who we are because it makes you uncomfortable. I understand that you think might makes right. The hall erupted in angry sounds. Several council members stood up, shouting in their own languages. The translation machines worked frantically to keep up. Mordek raised one hand, and silence fell. Immediately, choose your words carefully, human. You stand before the rulers of the galaxy. Sarah looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of creatures who could destroy her home with a single command. When she spoke again, her voice was calm and steady. Thank you for the 30-day notice, she said. It's more warning than most bullies give their victims. The silence that followed was absolute. No one had ever called the Galactic Council bullies to their faces. I request immediate transport back to Earth, Sarah continued. My government will need time to consider your generous offer. Veltar watched her carefully. Something was wrong. Humans were supposed to be emotional creatures, prone to fear and panic when threatened. But Sarah Chun looked like a predator that had just been shown where the prey was hiding. Granted, Mordek said after a long moment. 30 days, Ambassador, not 1 day more. Sarah bowed slightly, a gesture of politeness rather than submission. Understood, High Counselor. We'll be ready. She turned and walked back toward the great doors. Her footsteps echoed in the silence. Every council member watched her go dot as the doors closed behind her. Veltar felt a chill run down his spine. In 3 years of studying humans, he had learned that they had strange sayings for every situation. One of them came to his mind now. Be careful what you wish for. Council member Zareth clicked her claws together happily. That went better than expected. She seemed to understand the situation. Yes, Mordek agreed. The humans will see reason. They always do eventually. Fear is a universal language. But Veltar was not so sure. He had seen something in Sarah Chun's eyes when she said, We'll be ready. It was not fear. It was not resignation. It looked almost like ... anticipation. High Counselor Mordek dismissed the council session. As the representatives filed out, talking among themselves about the easy victory they had just won, Veltar remained in his seat. He pulled up files on his personal display, reviewing everything the council knew about human behavior. Humans did. Not like bullies. They had a strange habit of protecting the weak, even when it cost them greatly. They formed friendships across species lines that other civilizations found impossible to understand. And when they were threatened, they did something that no other species did. They united. Veltar closed his files and stood up slowly. The council had just made what might be the biggest mistake in galactic history. They had given humanity 30 days to prepare, thinking it would make them more afraid. Instead, they had given humanity 30 days to get angry. As Veltar left the Great Hall, he wondered if the council really understood what they had just started. Humans had another saying that he had learned in his studies. You have awakened a sleeping giant. The giant was about to wake up. Sarah Chun's ship landed on Earth 18 hours after leaving the council chambers. She had spent the entire journey writing her report, but her mind kept returning to High Counselor Mordek's words. 47 civilizations. Fleets that could darken the skies. Weapons that could crack planets. The transport took her directly to Geneva. to the underground complex that served as humanity's center of government. The Situation Room was already full when she arrived. President Martinez sat at the head of the long table, flanked by military leaders, scientists, and diplomats from around the world. "Sarah," President Martinez said as she entered, "tell us." Sarah took her seat and activated the holographic display. The council chambers appeared in the center of the table, showing the massive amphitheater and its alien occupants. She played back the entire meeting, letting her colleagues see exactly what they were facing. When the recording ended, the room was silent for a long moment. General Harrison, the head of Earth's Defense Force, was the first to speak. 47 civilizations. Do we have any idea what kind of military force that represents? Our best estimates put their combined fleet strength at over 50,000 ships. Admiral Park replied, pulling up her own displays. Everything from small patrol craft to planet killers. We have ... significantly less. The numbers appeared on the central display. Humanity's entire space presence. 43 colonies, 16 deep space stations, and a fleet of 800 ships. Most of those ships had been built for exploration and cargo hauling, not war. On paper, we're completely outmatched. General Harrison said grimly. Dr. Elizabeth Vasquez, the head of Xenological Studies, leaned forward. But they felt the need to threaten us specifically. In 3 years of contact, we've seen dozens of species simply comply with Council demands without question. The Altarians handed over their faster-than-light communication technology without even trying to negotiate. The Centauran League dissolved their independent government the day after the Council asked them to. What's your point, President? Martinez asked. My point is that they're afraid of us, Dr. Vasquez said. They just haven't figured out why yet. Foreign Minister Zhang pulled up diplomatic files. We've had contact with 86 different species in the past 3 years. 71 of them are not Council members. Most of them are classified as minor civilizations by the Council. Minor civilizations, Sarah repeated. That's what they called our allies. Species that don't matter enough to have a voice in galactic affairs. How many of those 71 species would stand with us? President Martinez asked. Zhang hesitated. Unknown. The Council has a history of punishing species that oppose them. Most would be too afraid to openly support us. General Harrison studied the tactical displays. Even if every non-Council species joined us, we'd still be outnumbered 10 to 1. Our technology is good, but it's not miracle-level good. The debate continued for hours. Some argued for acceptance of the Council's terms. Others wanted to try negotiating for better conditions. A few suggested that humanity should simply disappear into the deep space between stars, becoming nomads rather than submit. But Sarah Chun had been thinking about something else entirely. We're approaching this wrong, she said finally. The room fell quiet. We're thinking like the Council thinks. Ships versus ships. Technology versus technology. Military force versus military force. What else is there? Admiral Park asked. People. Sarah said simply. The Council rules through fear and intimidation. They've kept peace for 1,000 years by making sure no one ever challenges them. But what happens when someone does? Dr. Vasquez nodded slowly. The whole system depends on everyone believing the Council can't be beaten. Exactly, Sarah continued. They gave us 30 days because they expect us to spend that time being afraid. They expect us to realize how hopeless our situation is and give up. President Martinez leaned back in her chair. What do you suggest we do instead? Sarah stood up and walked to the holographic display. With a gesture, she changed it from showing military assets to showing something else. A web of connections between human colonies and the hundreds of species they had met. We do what we've always done, she said. We make friends. Sarah, General Harrison said gently. Friendship won't stop a fleet of 50,000 ships. Won't it? Sarah asked. The Council controls the galaxy through fear. But fear only works if people feel alone. What happens when they realize they're not alone anymore? Foreign Minister Zhang caught on first. You want to unite the minor civilizations. Not unite them to fight, Sarah clarified. Unite them to stand up, to say no, to show the galaxy that the Council's power comes from everyone believing they have no choice. Admiral Park frowned. Even if that worked, it would take years to build that kind of coalition. We have 30 days. We have 30 days to send a message, Sarah corrected. Not just to the Council, but to every species in the galaxy. Every civilization that's been bullied, every world that's been forced to submit, every people that's been told they don't matter. President Martinez was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. What kind of message? Sarah smiled, and for the first time since returning from the council chambers, she looked genuinely happy. The kind of message humans are good at sending. That bullies can be beaten, that standing up is possible, that no one has to face their fears alone. The room buzzed with new energy as people began to understand what Sarah was proposing. It wasn't a military strategy or a diplomatic maneuver. It was something much more dangerous to the Council's power structure. It was hope. General Harrison pulled up new displays, showing human ships scattered throughout the galaxy. Our exploration vessels are already in contact with most of the minor civilizations. We could have messages delivered within days. Not messages, Sarah said. Visits, face-to-face conversations. The Council rules from a distance. We need to be there in person. Dr. Vasquez was already working on her own plans. We'll need to be careful about how we approach this. One wrong word, and species will report us to the Council to save themselves. Then we don't ask them to fight, Sarah said. We ask them to remember. To remember what they wanted before the Council told them what they could have. To remember what they dreamed before they were told to stop dreaming. President Martinez stood up. All in favor of Sarah's approach? Every hand in the room went up. Then it's decided, the president said. We have 30 days to remind the galaxy what freedom looks like. Within hours, messages went out to every human ship, station, and colony in the galaxy. The orders were simple. Talk to everyone. Visit every species humanity had ever met. Share the Council's ultimatum, but more importantly, share humanity's response. Captain Rodriguez of the exploration ship Endeavor was the first to report back. His ship had visited the Cathari homeworld, a species that had been forced to abandon half their colonies after refusing Council expansion limits 50 years ago. They remember, his message said. They remember wanting to explore. They remember having dreams bigger than the Council would allow. And they remember thinking they were the only ones who felt that way. Similar reports came in from across the galaxy. The Solani, whose faster-than-light communication technology had been seized by the Council. The Vex, whose trade routes had been restricted to prevent them from becoming too wealthy. The Director, whose military had been disbanded after they won too many victories against Council-approved pirates. Dozens of species, all with the same story. All told that resistance was futile. All forced to submit. All believing they were alone. But they weren't alone anymore. On day 5 of the 30-day countdown, something unprecedented happened. A Cathari ship appeared at the edge of human space, requesting permission to dock at Mars Station. It was the first time in 50 years that a Cathari vessel had left their restricted territory without Council permission. The ship's captain had a simple message. We heard you said no to the Council. We wanted to see what that looked like. By day 10, there were ships from 12 different species gathered around human worlds. By day 15, the number had grown to 28. They came not as military allies, but as witnesses. Species that had spent decades believing they were powerless, coming to see what defiance looked like. The council noticed. Emergency sessions were called. Ambassadors were dispatched to the visiting species, demanding explanations. But for the first time in 1,000 years, the minor civilizations had an answer other than yes, we'll comply immediately. They said, we're thinking about it. 3 simple words that changed everything. Because thinking meant choice, and choice meant freedom. And freedom was exactly what the council had spent 1,000 years teaching the galaxy was impossible. On day 28, Sarah Chun stood in the observation deck of Luna Station, looking out at a sight that would have been unimaginable a month before. Ships from 43 different species floated in formation around Earth, not as conquerors or invaders, but as friends and allies. They weren't there to fight the council. They were there to show the galaxy that the council could be said no to. And in 2 days, the galaxy would see what happened when someone actually did it. The transformation began on day 1 and never stopped. Sarah Chun watched from her office window as another cargo ship lifted off from Earth, heading for the Mars shipyards. It was the 20th launch that morning, and it was barely past noon. Across the human territories, 43 worlds had become a single massive factory. On Earth, automobile plants now produced parts for spacecraft. On Mars, the great mining complexes worked around the clock, pulling metals from the red soil. On Europa, underwater cities that had built homes were now building weapons. But the real change was not in the factories or the shipyards. It was in the people. General Harrison had been wrong about one thing. Humans did have miracle-level technology. They just hadn't realized it yet. The miracle was not in their computers or their engines or their weapons. The miracle was in their ability to work together when everything depended on it. Captain Marcus Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the exploration ship Endeavour, watching his crew install the 20th new weapon system of the week. His ship had been built to study planets and make contact with new species. Now it bristled with railguns, missile launchers, and experimental energy weapons that Dr. Vasquez's science teams had designed in 72 hours. Captain, his weapons. OFFICER called out. The new targeting system is online. We're officially combat ready. Marcus nodded, but his attention was on the ship approaching from starboard. It was a Cathari cruiser, one of 6 that had arrived yesterday. The Cathari had not been invited to fight. They had simply shown up and asked where they could help. The answer had been everywhere. Cathari. Engineers worked alongside human technicians, sharing 50 years of experience in building ships that could hide from council sensors. Solani communications experts helped design message systems that could not be tracked or blocked. Vex traders provided intelligence about council military movements and supply lines. But it was more than just practical help. It was hope. Message. Coming in from Earth Command, Rodriguez's communications officer announced, all ships are to report readiness status. Rodriguez looked around his bridge. Half his crew was human. The other half came from 6 different species, all working together like they had trained for years instead of days. Tell Earth Command that Endeavour is ready for whatever comes next. On the council homeworld of Crescia, High Counselor Mordock stood in his private chamber, watching intelligence reports that made less sense each day. The humans were not behaving like any threatened species in galactic history. They are spreading out, reported Intelligence Director Val Kuhn, one of Mordock's most trusted advisors. Our observers report human ships visiting systems throughout the galaxy, not massing for defense, but talking to people. Talking, Mordock repeated. What kind of threat do they think talking poses to us? Unknown, High Counselor. But the effect is measurable. 17 minor civilizations have failed to respond to routine council communications in the past week. Not refusing orders, simply not responding. Mordek's forearms tensed. In 1,000 years of council rule, species always responded. To communications, fear guaranteed it. What do our spies report from the human territories? Valkon hesitated. That is, concerning High Counselor. We have lost contact with most of our intelligence assets in human space. The ones still reporting say that the humans are preparing for war, but not in any way we understand. Explain. They are not building fortresses or massing fleets at strategic points. Instead, they seem to be preparing their entire civilization for conflict. Every human ship, station, and colony is involved. Even their civilian vessels are being armed. Mordak walked to his window, looking out at the vast city that covered most of Krexia's main continent. Billions of Kreks lived and worked below, secure in the knowledge that their civilization ruled the galaxy. That security depended on everyone else being afraid to challenge them. How many ships do the humans have now? He asked, difficult to determine. Our count 3 weeks ago was 800 vessels. Current estimates range from 1,500 to 3,000, depending on how many civilian ships they have converted. 3,000, Mordak mused, against our 50,000. Why are they not seeking terms? Why are they not begging for mercy? Unknown, High Counselor, but there is something else. Our long-range sensors have detected human ships in the Veil Nebula. That region is outside Council space, with no strategic value. What are they doing there? We believe they are establishing a fallback position, a place to retreat to when our fleets arrive. Mordak nodded. That made sense. The humans were preparing to run when they realized how outmatched they were. It was disappointing, but expected. What he did not know was that the Veil Nebula contained something much more dangerous than a human retreat. It contained Captain Elena Vasquez and the science ship Discovery, working on a project that would change the nature of warfare forever. Dr. Chun, Captain Vasquez called out to the lead scientist on her team. Are you certain this will work? Dr. Michael Chun, Sarah's younger brother, looked up from his calculations. The Discovery's main laboratory had been converted into something that looked more like a mad scientist's workshop than a proper research facility. Cables ran everywhere, connecting experimental devices that hummed with barely contained energy. The theory is sound, he said. The Council's communications network relies on quantum entanglement across the galaxy. Every ship, station, and world is connected to the central system. If we can inject our signal into that network, we can broadcast to every communication device in Council space simultaneously, Captain Vasquez finished. Even if they try to shut us down, it will take time to trace the source. More than that, Dr. Chon said with a smile that reminded Captain Vasquez strongly of his sister. Once our signal is in their network, they cannot remove it without shutting down all communication in the galaxy. It becomes part of their system. It was a typically human solution to an impossible problem. Instead of trying to match Council technology, they had found a way to use that technology against itself. How long until we're ready? Captain Vasquez asked. 48 hours, Dr. Chon replied. Assuming the Council gives us that long, they would. The Council's ultimatum had 2 days left to run, and their arrogance would not let them act early. They wanted the humans to spend every possible moment being afraid. Instead, those moments were being used to prepare the greatest surprise in galactic history. Back on Earth, Sarah Chun stood in a room that had been empty 3 weeks ago. Now, it was filled with screens, showing every human ship, station, and colony in the galaxy. 1,000 points of light, representing millions of people who had chosen to stand together rather than kneel alone. Final readiness report coming in, announced Colonel Park, who had been promoted to coordinate humanity's entire military response. All fleets report ready. All colonies report ready. All civilian evacuation procedures are in place. Sarah nodded. The evacuation procedures were important. Despite everything they had planned, there was no guarantee that the Council could be stopped. If the worst happened, humanity needed to survive somewhere. What about our allies? Sarah asked. 43 species have ships in position, Colonel Park replied. They are not armed for battle, but they are ready to broadcast witness reports to the entire galaxy. Whatever happens, everyone will see it. That was the key to everything. The Council's power depended on fear, and fear depended on uncertainty. If the galaxy could see exactly what happened when someone stood up to the Council, that fear would begin to crack. Message from the Cathari Fleet Commander, the communications officer announced. He wants to know if there are any last-minute changes to the plan. Sarah almost smiled. There was no plan, not in the way military strategists understood plans. There were principles. Stand together, protect each other, show the galaxy that resistance was possible. Everything else would depend on what the Council chose to do. Tell Commander Valtar that the plan remains the same, Sarah said. We stand up, we stand together, and we make sure everyone sees us do it. Yes, ma'am. Sarah walked to the main display, which showed the tactical situation throughout human space. In 36 hours, the Council's ultimatum would expire. In 36 hours, the most powerful military force in galactic history would arrive to enforce their will, but they would not find a conquered species waiting to surrender. They would find something that had not existed in the galaxy for over 1,000 years. A coalition of the willing, united not by fear, but by hope. The last message of the day came from Admiral Sarah Chun, who had been given command of humanity's entire space fleet. Her ship, the redesignated CNS Defiance, floated at the edge of the Veil Nebula with the largest gathering of allied vessels in galactic history. All ships, this is Admiral Chun. Her voice carried across space to reach every human vessel, an allied ship in the galaxy. Tomorrow, we make history. Not because we are the strongest or the most advanced, but because we are the first in 1,000 years to say that being afraid is not the same thing as being smart. She paused, looking out at the hundreds of ships floating in formation around her flagship. Human vessels mixed with Cathari cruisers, Solani communication ships, Vex traders, and dozens of other species that had never worked together before. Day 29 arrived with the kind of silence that comes before storms. Across the galaxy, billions of beings went about their daily lives, unaware that everything was about to change. On the Council homeworld of Cretia, High Counselor Mordok reviewed the final preparations for humanity's punishment. Fleet status report, he commanded from his war room deep beneath the Council chambers. All forces ready, High Counselor, Admiral Zektar replied. The military commander's scarred hide told the story of a dozen campaigns against defiant species. 53,000 ships in total, the largest force ever assembled. And the humans? Still gathered in the Veil Nebula. Our scouts report approximately 3,000 vessels, mostly converted civilian craft. They appear to be waiting. Mordek nodded with satisfaction. The humans had realized their situation and chosen to make their last stand in empty space. Away from populated worlds, it showed wisdom, even in defeat. Tomorrow, we jump to their position and end this, he said. Make it quick and clean. I want the minor civilizations to see that resistance is futile, but I do not want them to see unnecessary cruelty. What Mordok did not know was that at that exact moment, Dr. Michael Chun was making final adjustments to the most important piece of equipment in human history. The Quantum Communication Act was complete, tested, and ready to deploy. Are you certain about the timing? Captain Vasquez asked as she watched Dr. Chun work. "It has to be simultaneous across the entire galaxy," he replied, running one last check on his calculations. Every council communication array, every government broadcast system, every civilian communication device. If even one major system is left out, the council can use it to override our signal. And you can really reach every single device? Dr. Chun smiled with the confidence of someone who had just revolutionized galactic communication. The council's quantum network is actually quite elegant. They use entangled particles to create instantaneous communication across vast distances. The problem is that once you tap into the network, there is no way to limit where your signal goes. It reaches everything connected to the system, which is everything in council space. Everything, Dr. Chun confirmed, including the minor civilizations that use council communication technology under license. This message will reach every inhabited world in the galaxy. Captain Vasquez looked out at the stars through the Discovery's viewports. In a few hours, the most important message in galactic history would travel from this small ship to billions of beings across thousands of worlds. "No pressure," she muttered. The message itself was already recorded. Sarah Chun had spent hours perfecting every word, every gesture, every pause. It was not a speech designed to inspire just humans. It was designed to speak to every species that had ever been told to submit, every civilization that had ever been forced to give up their dreams. On the bridge of the CNS Defiance, Admiral Sarah Chun watched the final preparations. Around her flagship, nearly 3,000 ships hung in space like a metal constellation. Human vessels formed the core, but ships from 43 other species added their strength to the formation. "Admiral," her communications officer called. "Out. We're receiving final confirmations from all allied vessels." "Everyone is ready," Sarah nodded. Ready for what, exactly? No one was entirely sure. The plan was simple: broadcast the message, make their stand, and show the galaxy that the Council could be defied. What happened after that would depend on how the galaxy responded. "Any word from our observers?" she asked. "All monitoring posts report normal Council activity. No sign that they suspect anything unusual." That was good. The Council's arrogance was their greatest weakness. They were so confident in their power that the possibility of a real challenge never occurred to them. Time until the ultimatum expires? 14 hours, 18 minutes. Sarah looked around her bridge. Her crew was a mix of species, but they all wore the same expression: determined, nervous, and ready for whatever came next. They were about to make history, one way or another. The hours crawled by. Across the galaxy, Council fleets moved into position for what their commanders expected to be a routine enforcement action. On dozens of worlds, minor civilizations watched their communication screens and wondered if the humans would really go through with their defiance. Exactly 1 hour before the ultimatum's deadline, everything changed. It started on the Krex homeworld, in the middle of High Counselor Mordok's final strategy meeting. The room's main communication screen flickered, showing static for just a moment. Then, impossibly, it displayed something that should not have been there: a human face. "What is this?" Mordok demanded, but his communication staff were frantically working at their consoles, trying to understand what was happening. The same scene was playing out across the galaxy. Every screen, every communication device, every datapad was suddenly showing the same image. Ambassador Sarah Chun, standing in what appeared to be the bridge of a human ship. "To the Galactic Council, and all who hear this message," Sarah began, her voice carrying clearly across space to reach every inhabited world in the galaxy. "You have made an error in judgment." Mordek watched in growing horror as he realized what was happening. Somehow, the humans had hijacked the entire galactic communication network. Every civilization in Council space was hearing this message simultaneously. You assumed that because we are young, we are weak, Sarah continued. Because we are few, we are insignificant. Because we are distant from your core worlds, we are vulnerable. The camera slowly began to pull back, revealing more of the bridge around Sarah. Behind her, the bridge crew worked at their stations, and through the viewports, other ships could be seen. Sir, one of Mordok's communication officers called out desperately. We cannot stop the transmission. It is coming through our own quantum network. To shut it down, we would have to disable all communication in the galaxy. Mordek felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature in his war room. The humans had not just defied the Council. They had turned the Council's own technology against them. You gave us 30 days to submit, Sarah said, and now the camera had pulled back far enough to show the truth. She was not alone on a single ship. Behind her, through the bridge windows, hundreds of vessels could be seen stretching away into space. Ships from dozens of different species, united in a way that had not been seen in the galaxy for over 1,000 years. Instead, we spent 30 days talking to every civilization you have bullied, suppressed, or ignored. The image shifted to show external views of the fleet. Human ships flew in formation with Cathari cruisers, Solani communication vessels, Vex trading ships, and craft from dozens of species that most Council members had forgotten existed. We learned about the Cathari, who refused your expansion. Limits and watched their colonies burn. Sarah's voice continued over the images. We learned about the Solani, who developed faster-than-light communication and were forced to hand over the technology. We learned about 43 different species who were given the same choice you gave us: submit or be destroyed. On worlds across the galaxy, beings stopped what they were doing to watch. In the Cathare home system, families gathered around their screens to see their own ships flying proudly alongside the human fleet. On Solani trading posts, workers watched their communication ships, broadcasting messages of hope instead of Council orders. Here is what you did not learn about humans, Sarah said, and her voice carried an edge that made even Mordek lean forward. We have a saying, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. The camera was back on Sarah's face now, and her eyes burned with controlled fury. You have mistaken our kindness for weakness, our diplomacy for fear. You have ruled through intimidation for so long that you forgot what happens when someone refuses to be intimidated. Mordak was shouting orders to his staff, demanding that they find a way to stop the transmission. But it was too late. The message was already spreading beyond the quantum network, being recorded and retransmitted by millions of beings across the galaxy. Your ultimatum expires in 1 hour, Sarah continued. Your fleets are already moving to enforce your will. But remember this. You are not just threatening humanity anymore. You are threatening everyone who believes that might does not make right. The final image showed the entire Allied fleet, thousands of ships from dozens of species, hanging in space like a constellation of defiance. It was beautiful and terrible, and absolutely unprecedented in galactic history. And we humans? Sarah's voice carried one last message across the galaxy. We have another saying, united we stand. The transmission ended, but the damage was done. For the first time in over 1,000 years, the Galactic Council had been openly challenged in front of the entire galaxy. Worse, they had been made to look foolish, outmaneuvered by a species they had dismissed as insignificant. On the bridge of the CNS Defiance, Admiral Sarah Chun smiled grimly as she watched the communication officer confirm that the message had been received across the galaxy. Ma'am, the tactical officer called out. Long-range sensors are detecting incoming ships. Lots of them. The Council fleet? Yes, ma'am. 53,000 vessels, approaching fast. They will arrive in 6 Hours, Sarah nodded. The message had been sent. The Council fleet arrived at dawn, ship time, emerging from hyperspace in a formation that spoke of absolute confidence. 53,000 vessels spread across space like a metal storm cloud, their weapons powered and ready. At the center of the formation, High Counselor Mordek's command ship, the Eternal Dominion, was a kilometer-long monument to Council power. Admiral Sarah Chun watched the arrival from the bridge of the CNS Defiance. Through her viewports, she could see the Allied fleet, 3,000 ships from 44 different species, hanging in space like a tiny constellation before the approaching storm. They outnumber us 17-1, her tactical officer reported with studied calm. I can count, Sarah replied. She activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the Admiral. The Council fleet has arrived. In a few minutes, we will either make history or become history. Either way, the galaxy is watching. She paused, looking around her bridge at the mixed crew of humans and aliens who had chosen to stand together. Remember why we are here? Not to win a war, but to send a message. That message is simple. Bullies can be faced down. Fear can be overcome. And sometimes, standing up is more important than surviving. The Council fleet continued its approach, moving with the slow, deliberate confidence of predators who knew their prey had nowhere to run. Admiral Zektar, commanding the assault from his flagship, opened a communication channel. Human vessels, his voice carried across space with the authority of 1,000 military victories. You are ordered to surrender immediately. Power down your weapons, prepare to be boarded, and submit to Council justice. This is your only warning. Admiral. Sarah Chun took a deep breath and opened her own channel, broadcasting not just to the Council fleet, but to every ship in the Allied formation. Unknown to the Council, the message was also being transmitted across the galaxy by hidden relay stations that Dr. Chun's team had positioned during the 30-day preparation period. Council fleet, this is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Human Defense Force. Your ultimatum has expired. Our answer is no. The words hung in space for a moment, carrying across light years to reach every inhabited world in the galaxy. For the first time in 1,000 years, someone had told the Galactic Council no and meant it. Then you have chosen death, Admiral. Sektar replied. All ships, attack formation. Eliminate the human fleet. What happened next would be studied by military historians for centuries to come, not because it was a brilliant tactical victory, but because it redefined what warfare could be. The Council fleet advanced in perfect formation, their larger ships, moving to long-range positions, while fighters and destroyers accelerated ahead to engage the human vessels. It was a textbook assault against inferior force, designed to minimize Council losses while maximizing the destruction of enemy ships. But the Allied fleet did not respond like any enemy force in galactic history. Instead of forming defensive lines or attempting to retreat, the human ships scattered in dozens of different directions, using the nebulous gases and radiation to mask their movements. Their alien allies did not fight like a unified fleet either. The Kethari ships used stealth tactics perfected over 50 years of hiding from Council patrols. The Vex vessels, built for speed and maneuverability, darted between the larger Council ships like angry hornets. The Solani communication ships began broadcasting contradictory orders on Council frequencies, creating confusion in the enemy formation. What are they doing? Admiral Zektar demanded as his tactical display dissolved into chaos. Where is their formation? Where is their command structure? His intelligence officer studied the screens with growing alarm. Sir, they appear to be fighting as 44 separate fleets, each using different tactics, but somehow coordinated by the human vessels. It was unprecedented. Every species in galactic history fought the same way. Organized formations, Clear command structures. Predictable. Tactics. But the Allied fleet was fighting like 44 different species, with 44 different approaches to warfare, all somehow working together. A human destroyer, its hull breached and engines failing, suddenly accelerated directly toward Council Dreadnought. The larger ship's captain laughed, assuming the humans were desperately attempting a ramming attack that could never penetrate his shields. He stopped laughing when the destroyer detonated its entire antimatter fuel supply just outside his shield perimeter. The explosion did not destroy the dreadnought, but the electromagnetic pulse crippled its weapon systems and left it defenseless against the three Cathari cruisers that emerged from the nebula's interference. "Sir? Admiral Zektar's communications." Officer called out in alarm. "The battle is being broadcast live across the galaxy. Every world, every communication system, every data network is carrying the transmission." Admiral Zektar felt the first touch of something he had never experienced in battle. Fear. Not fear of death, but fear of failure. The entire galaxy was watching as the invincible Council fleet struggled against a force that should have been destroyed in minutes. "Destroy the communication ships," he ordered. "Stop the broadcast." "We are trying, sir." But every Allied vessel seems to be equipped with transmission equipment. Even their fighters are broadcasting. On the bridge of this CNS Defiance, Admiral Sarah Chun watched her tactical display with grim satisfaction. They were losing ships faster than the Council, but that had never been the point. The point was to show the galaxy that the Council could bleed. "Ma'am," her weapons officer called out. "The Valiant just rammed that Council battleship." "Captain." Thompson's final transmission was, "Tell Earth we held the line." Sarah nodded, adding another name to the growing list of heroes who would be remembered long after this battle ended. "Signal the Cathari squadron. Have them move to support the Vex ships on the port flank." "Admiral," her communication officer interrupted. "We're receiving a priority message from Captain Rodriguez on the Endeavor. He says he has an idea." Sarah smiled despite herself. Human captains always had ideas, usually involving something dangerous and probably impossible. "Put him through." Captain Rodriguez's voice came through clearly, despite the jamming and interference of battle. "Admiral, the Council ships are fighting. Use like we're a traditional fleet, but we're not. We're 44 different species, with 44 different ways of fighting." "Your point, Captain?" "My point is that they have 47 different species too. What if we remind them of that?" Sarah caught on immediately. The Council fleet might be unified in command, but it was composed of dozens of different species, each with their own languages, traditions, and military doctrines. That diversity was normally a strength, but in the chaos of this unprecedented battle. "Do it," she ordered. Captain Rodriguez smiled and turned to his mixed crew. "You heard the Admiral. Time to start some friendly conversations with our Council counterparts." What followed was perhaps the strangest psychological warfare operation in galactic history. Using captured Council communication codes and the language skills of their alien allies, the human ships began broadcasting messages to specific species within the Council fleet. To the Vorthic ships. "Why are you fighting for the Krex? Remember when they took your breeding worlds?" To the Seth vessels, "The humans never tried to sterilize your entire species. The Krex did." To the smaller member species, "You know the humans have never threatened you. You know the Krex have." It was subtle, careful, and devastatingly effective. The Council fleet had been unified by fear and habit, but neither was strong enough to survive doubt. As the battle raged on, response times began to slow. Ships hesitated before following orders. Formation discipline weakened. The turning point came when a squadron of Vorthic destroyers simply stopped fighting. They did not join the Allied fleet, but they did not fire on human ships either. Within minutes, 3 more Council species had ceased active participation in the battle. Status report. Admiral Ziktar demanded, as his perfectly organized assault dissolved into chaos. 17% of our fleet has ceased combat operations. His tactical officer reported with disbelief. They are not retreating, but they are not advancing either. Order them back into formation immediately. Sir, they are claiming communication difficulties. All of them. Admiral Ziktar stared at his tactical display, watching 1,000 years of Council military doctrine crumble before his eyes. His fleet still outnumbered the Allied forces, but the psychological advantage was gone. For the first time in galactic history, Council species were refusing to fight a Council battle. On his command ship high above the battle, High Counselor Mordak watched the impossible unfold. The humans were losing ships. Their alien allies were being pushed back, but somehow they were winning. Not the battle, but something more important. They were winning the war for the galaxy's soul. Open a channel to the human flagship, he ordered. Finally, Admiral Sarah Chun's face appeared on his screen, showing the strain of hours of desperate battle, but no sign of surrender. High Counselor, she said simply. Admiral, Mordak replied, using her title for the first time. What do you want? Sarah's answer would echo across the galaxy for generations. We want what we have always wanted. To be left alone to make friends. With whoever will have us. But since you made this about power, here are our terms.